The wind carried the smell of rain and iron. Coyotes called from the low hills. A lantern swung on the porch of a shuttered mercantile. In the street, dust moved like a living thing. That was the night Nora Vale saw him again. He rode in slow, a dark horse, a darker coat, hat tilted low. The kind of man mountains remember. He brought quiet with him, the way storms do before they break. Folks in the boarding house closed their curtains. The piano inside the saloon stopped. Only the wind kept speaking. His name was Hayes Rourke. She knew it without wanting to. She had heard it in whispers. She had heard it in the lawman's voice when he warned her not to look too long at trouble. Hayes had trouble written across the set of his jaw. He had gentleness in the way he dismounted and patted the horse's neck. Nora stood beneath the canvas awning of the telegraph office. Her fingers were cold around a letter she would not send. The letter said she was done with running. It said she would not keep her heart in a locked trunk anymore. It said she wanted to be known and to know a man who would stay. She had written it for herself. She had not yet believed it. Hayes tied his reins to the post. His boots sounded soft on the wet boards. He did not look left or right. He looked at the sky, then at the street, then at the door of the saloon. The yellow light painted his cheekbones. A thin line of water ran from his hat brim to his collar. He lifted his face as if tasting the weather. The night tasted of promises it could not keep. Nora's breath caught, not from fear, from the ache of recognition. There are souls that sing in the same key. Sometimes they hear each other before they speak. He turned toward the telegraph office as if called. His gaze landed on her. The world drew tight and still. "Evening," he said. Her voice found its steadiness inside the quiet. "You picked a restless town." "Restless suits me," he said. "It keeps a man awake." "Awake is not the same as alive." He studied her face. He was careful with his looks. He did not take more than he offered. Still, she felt the warmth of it along her skin. The rain began, slow as prayer. She tucked the letter into her coat pocket. Hayes noticed the gesture. He noticed everything. That was the kind of danger he was. "What keeps you here?" he asked, "when the road is only a step away?" "A promise," she said, "and a debt." He nodded like a man who had carried both. "To yourself," he said, "or to someone else." She thought of her mother's quiet sorrow. She thought of the sheriff who said her help meant safety for the town. She thought of the outlaw story that had chased her across 3 counties and still had not caught her name. Then she thought of the way her heart wanted a place to set down. "To the woman I mean to become," she said. Hayes's mouth tipped in something close to a smile. It warmed and then cooled, like iron in a forge. "Then you have better reasons than most." A wagon rattled past. The horse shied at a clap of thunder. Hayes reached for the bridle in one easy movement and calmed the animal with his palm and voice. Nora watched the quiet strength of him. It was not a show. It was something older, a steadiness born of long roads and long shadows. The horse settled. The driver tipped his hat. Hayes stepped back into the lantern light. "Storm's coming," he said. "It already came," she said. "It just learned to walk." He lifted his gaze to the black horizon. "You speak like you have ridden with rain." "I have sat with it," she said, "and I have learned its language. Then you can translate a man like me. Maybe, she said, if you want to be known. He let that hang there like a coat on a nail. The wind pressed at them. The rain thickened to a silver curtain. Water gathered on the brim of his hat and fell. He did not move to leave. She did not move to send him away. She thought of warnings. Do not take in strays. Do not make a home out of a storm. But healing often begins where rules go quiet. Her pulse counted the seconds between thunder and light. Her heart kept pace. He broke the hush. You should get inside, he said. The boards are slick. What if I like the rain? Then you are braver than me. You do not look like a man who fears weather. I fear the ways it changes what a person admits, he said. Rain makes truth sound softer. It makes the world honest, she said. A lightning flash lit the long spine of the ridge. All the roofs threw back the light. In that clean white moment, she saw the tired set of his shoulders, the guarding in his eyes, the kind of burden men carry when they have taken blame that was only half theirs, and she felt the first soft pull of trust. It came quiet as a breath. A piano started again inside the saloon. A woman laughed. Glass clinked. Life resumed its noise, but quieter. Nora thought of the letter in her pocket. The words were ready. Maybe she did not need the paper anymore. Come in from the street, she said. Let me pour you coffee. He shook his head. I am not the kind of man you bring into a bright room. I draw shadows where I stand. You did not scare the horse, she said. You will not scare a cup. He looked at the door. He looked at her. He looked at the rain. Every choice leaves a mark. He took off his hat, brushed water from it, and stood bareheaded to the storm. He had a scar at his hairline. Not large, not loud. It changed his face the way a river changes a stone, not by force, by time. She opened the office door. Warmth met them. The stove ticked. A single lamp showed a tidy desk, a map with thumbtacks, a tin of sugar. The scent of oiled wood and paper rose like memory. She lit the second lamp and set a kettle on. Hayes stood just inside the door. He did not drip on the rug. And he held his hat against his thigh like a penitent. Sit, she said. I will stand. Sit, she said again, softer. He obeyed. It surprised them both. She smiled without showing teeth. She poured coffee into 2 enamel cups and passed him one. Their fingers did not touch. Heat moved between them all the same. He drank. He closed his eyes. A sound left him. Not a groan. Not a sigh. Something like relief given shape. It has been a while since something tasted like home. What did home taste like? She asked. Heat and patience, he said. Something that took time and repaid it. She held her cup close. Then we are even. He opened his eyes. They were a storm color. Grey near the rim, blue at the edge. He looked at her like a man reading a map and finding roads he had not seen. I am not here to make trouble, he said. Trouble does not need an invitation, she said. It shows up when coffee smells like this. He gave a quiet laugh. The rain drummed harder. The kettle hissed. A draft lifted a corner of the map. His gaze followed the lifting edge. It revealed a tiny red mark near a town in the hills. A trail. A plan. She pressed the paper flat with her palm. He looked back at her. You are expecting someone. Everyone expects someone, she said. What we expect says who we are. But then she whispered, the night seemed to say through the rain, "Tell him what you fear." She met his eyes. "I fear men who leave before the dawn," she said. "I fear the way silence can feel like a door closing. I fear wanting a life I am told I cannot have." He held her gaze like a vow. "I fear the day I stop wanting anything," he said. "That is the kind of death that walks." They did not speak for a while. The quiet was not empty. It was a room they both needed. The stove ticked again. A line of water ran from his sleeve to his wrist. She handed him a cloth. He dried his hands. His knuckles were scarred, not from cruelty, from work. Outside, a horse snorted, then another. Men spoke low, careful with their words. Nora saw the angle of Hayes's shoulders change. He set his cup down without sound. The air in the room shifted, not with fear, with readiness. He listened. He did not reach for a gun. He reached for stillness. That was how he prepared for storms that had a face and a name. "Company," he said. Nora crossed to the lamp and turned the wick down. Gold softened to amber, amber to hush. The rain masked footsteps for a breath. Then the steps became clear. They moved toward the door of the telegraph office. If this beginning has warmed a quiet corner of your chest, stay close. The night still has more to tell. Let your presence be known in the calm between raindrops, so this small fire keeps burning. The knock came soft, like the first warning of thunder. Hayes didn't move. He just turned his head toward the sound, his body already a wall between Nora and the door. The rain outside thickened, a steady roar against the roof. The lamp burned low, gold light trembling across the edges of his jaw. 3 knocks, then a pause, then one more. "Sheriff's men," Hayes said quietly. "They use that rhythm, careful not to spook what they're hunting." Nora's throat tightened. "They can't find you here." "They can find anyone if the night's long enough." He stepped away from the table, his boots whispering on the floorboards. His hand brushed the holster at his hip, but didn't rest there. He looked toward the back room, where a narrow hallway led to the telegraph storage. 1 door, 1 window. Not much of a choice, but enough for a man who knew how to disappear. Nora caught his sleeve. "Don't run. It'll make you look guilty." He turned, and for a moment she saw something break in his eyes. Not fear, but the tired kind of knowing that men carry when the world has already decided their story. "Guilt doesn't care if you run or stand still," he said. And she wanted to say his name, to hold him there in that small human pause between flight and fate. But the knock came again, louder now. The storm flashed white outside. Hayes moved into the shadows near the door. Nora swallowed hard, straightened her spine, and opened it. 2 men filled the doorway, rain dripping from their coats, badges glinting dull in the lamplight. The sheriff wasn't among them, but his scent of tobacco and authority lingered in their tone. "Evening, Miss Vale," the taller one said. "Didn't expect to find the office open this late." "I was finishing up telegram records," she said smoothly. "Storm's got the lines humming." The second man leaned on the frame. "You alone?" She nodded. Her pulse beat too loud in her ears. The taller man scanned the room. "You sure? We're tracking someone come through from Red Mesa. Big fella on a dark horse. Carries quiet. You might have seen him." Her hand brushed the edge of the table, steadying herself. Only strangers tonight are the storm and you two. The man grinned. Careful, miss. Storms wash up all kinds. Behind the doorframe, Hayes stood perfectly still, a ghost made of patience. His hand rested near his coat pocket, not his gun. His breath didn't break the air. He'd been hunted before. He knew how to make silence his weapon. The taller deputy tipped his hat. All right, then. If you see anyone, you send word to the sheriff come morning. I will. Good night, Miss Vale. When the door closed, Nora leaned her forehead against the wood. She waited until she couldn't hear boots on the porch. Then she turned. Hayes was already moving toward the back, silent as dusk. You're not staying, she said. I can't, he said. They'll double back. They always do. You didn't do anything. He met her eyes. Out here. That's not the point. The rain softened outside, a curtain lifting to quiet. She followed him to the back room. He checked the window latch, the line of the hill behind the office, the dark ribbon of road that led out of town. The wet world gleamed silver under flashes of lightning. You could ride till morning, she said. Cross the ridge, lose them in the breaks. He shook his head. Ridge is too open. They'd see me clear as a prayer. Then stay, she said, surprising herself. Just for the night. His eyes lingered on hers, steady and unreadable. You don't know what you're offering. Maybe I do. He studied her a long time. The storm's light caught the edge of his cheek, the scar that carved through memory. You said you feared men who left before dawn. Yes. Then don't ask one to stay, he said softly. But she didn't move aside. The air between them thickened, warm from the stove, trembling with all the things neither dared say. I'm not afraid of you, she said. He gave a rough sound that was half a laugh, half a confession. Then you should be. Her hand rose, stopped midway. His gaze caught it, trapped it there in the quiet. Why do they chase you, Hayes? She asked. What truth are you carrying that no one wants to hear? His answer came slow, like a man digging up something buried deep. I kept another man alive who wasn't supposed to see morning. Sheriff called it treason. I called it mercy. Her breath trembled. Mercy costs less than blood. Not out here. The kettle whistled sharp. The sound cut the moment clean, leaving its ache behind. She turned away, poured what little water remained into a cup. Her hand shook. She felt him behind her, close enough to change the air. The heat of him was its own storm. He took the cup from her gently. Their fingers brushed. The touch was small, but it carried the weight of every word they hadn't spoken. He drank, set the cup down, then stepped back. You should blow out the lamps, he said. You'll sleep easier in the dark. She met his eyes again. Will you? He smiled without joy. Men like me don't sleep. We just wait for daylight to decide what we deserve. He moved toward the back door. She followed him, heart fighting between reason and need. The rain had eased to a whisper. The world smelled of wet sage and iron. Hayes, she said, voice low. If I asked you not to go, would you listen? He paused, turned. His hand rested on the doorframe. You ask like you mean it. I do. He breathed once, deep and quiet, like a man tasting peace for the first time in years. Then you've already made it harder than it should be. Stay till dawn, she whispered. Just till then. He looked past her shoulder into the small room that had started to feel like safety. Then he looked back at her. All right, he said, till dawn. The rain sighed against the glass, as if the sky itself approved. Nora reached for the lamp, dimmed it to a golden hum. She could hear his boots on the wood floor as he settled near the stove, hat in his hands, shoulders heavy but easier now. She leaned against the wall, listening to the rhythm of rain and breath. The silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt like the start of something the world wouldn't understand. And somewhere in the dark, his voice came quiet. Thank you, Nora. For what? For not asking who I was before tonight. She smiled, unseen. Tomorrow's close enough. He nodded once. The fire popped softly. A peace too fragile for words settled between them. But peace, like dawn, never comes without warning. Outside, hooves struck the mud. Slow, deliberate, close. Then another set joined it. Hayes opened his eyes, all quiet, gone from his face. They're back, he murmured. If your heart still hears the storm beneath the quiet, stay with me. The night hasn't told its secret yet. The sound of the hooves didn't rush. They circled. 2 riders. Maybe 3. Slow, steady, patient, the way men ride when they already know where they're going. Hayes moved to the window, lifted a corner of the curtain with 2 fingers. Moonlight cut through the last of the clouds, laying silver over mud. He could see their silhouettes, broad hats, slick coats, rifles slung low. Not deputies, not law, something colder. He turned to Nora. You said they were the sheriff's men earlier. These aren't. Her breath caught. Then who? Men who follow money, not badges. He stepped away from the window, quiet as smoke. They're hunting what the law can't prove. Nora's pulse stumbled. What are they after? Not me, he said softly. What I'm carrying. He reached under his coat. For a moment, she feared steel. Instead, he pulled out a small leather pouch, tied tight with twine and dust. He set it on the table between them. Nora stared at it. What is it? Something that was supposed to die with a man 2 counties east. Then why didn't it? Because I don't kill for convenience. The words hung heavy. Outside, the horses stopped. The silence that followed was too complete. Rainwater dripped from the porch. Wood creaked under a shifting weight. Hayes took a breath. They'll come from both sides, one to the front, one to the back. They won't talk first. Then we run, she said. He shook his head. No, they expect that. She moved closer, her voice sharp in the whisper. You said you wouldn't bring danger here. I didn't, he said. It followed anyway. Lightning flickered again, lighting the small office. The maps, the stove, the glint of fear in her eyes. Hayes took the lamp and turned it low, then pointed to the narrow door behind the shelf. Storage room. There's a hatch under the floorboards. Leads to the coal pit. You'll be safe there till I draw them off. I'm not hiding. You don't have to like it. I won't do it. He looked at her, really looked. Her chin lifted, stubborn and trembling all at once. "Nora," he said gently, "this isn't your fight." She stepped closer, her voice shaking but certain. "You walked into my storm, Hayes. That makes it mine too." For a heartbeat, he almost smiled. Then the porch boards groaned again. He turned toward the door, face shadowed. A voice outside, low, raspy. "Rourke, you've ridden a long way for a dead man." Hayes didn't answer. He glanced at Nora once, eyes saying what his mouth couldn't. "If I fall, run." The latch moved. A gust of cold air pushed through the seams of the door. Then a hand slammed it open. 3 men filled the threshold. Wet coats, mud to their knees, their eyes the color of old pennies. The one in front grinned around a broken tooth. "Ain't no place left for ghosts, Hayes." Hayes didn't reach for his gun. He stepped forward, calm as midnight. "Then quit chasing them." The man spat into the mud. "Hand it over." Hayes's voice stayed low. "You kill me, it burns with me. You know that." The man's grin faded. "Maybe I just burn everything else till you change your mind." He nodded toward Nora. 2 of the riders shifted their stance. Hayes moved before thought could follow. The first man's pistol barely cleared leather before Hayes drove his elbow into his throat. The sound was sharp and final. The second drew a knife, caught Hayes's shoulder before he turned and sent him into the doorframe. Wood cracked. The third fired, splintering the shelf beside Nora's head. She dropped low, heart hammering, and reached for the iron poker by the stove. Her fingers closed around it. She rose behind the nearest man and swung hard. The sound was a hollow thud, followed by a curse and the fall of boots. Hayes turned at the noise, saw her standing there, eyes wild, hair loose, rainlight tangled in the strands. For an instant, something fierce and proud flickered across his face. Then the second man lunged again. Hayes caught him by the coat, slammed him against the wall, and the pistol went off once, close enough to shake the windows. The man dropped. Silence. Only rain now. Hayes stood still, chest heaving. He looked at the floor, then at her. "You should have hidden. You'd be dead if I had." He laughed once, not out of humor, but disbelief. "You're dangerous in your own way." She looked at his shoulder. Blood seeped through the torn fabric. "You're hurt." "Not yet," he said, but his knees betrayed him for half a second. She was there before he could fall. Her hands pressed against his arm, warm through the blood. "Sit," she said. "That's not a request." He obeyed this time. She tore the hem from her skirt, wrapped the wound tight. Her hands shook only after the knot was tied. "You need a doctor." He caught her wrist. "No doctor, no questions." She met his eyes. "Then I'll do it myself." He studied her a long moment. "You don't even know who I am." "I know enough. And what's that?" "That you didn't fire first." Outside, thunder rolled away into distance. The horses were gone. The world was quiet again, but it wasn't the same. Quiet now meant after. Hayes leaned his head back against the wall, breath unsteady. "You should go before they come back." "I'm not leaving you." His gaze softened, all the iron gone. "Don't make promises in the dark, Nora. Dawn has a way of changing what we mean." She sat beside him on the floor, still pressing her hand against his arm. "Then let Dawn try." He smiled, faint but real. You talk like you've already lost something worth keeping. Maybe I have. He looked at her then, really looked. The rain light made her eyes deep as river water. "You'll regret this," he said. "Not tonight," she whispered. The fire crackled in the stove. The storm's breath gentled against the windows. Between them, silence turned warm, close, alive. Outside, the world smelled of iron and rain and freedom. Inside, two souls began to thaw. And just before the wind died, he said quietly, "There's more to tell, but not all truths survive the night. If your heart still rides beside theirs beneath this storm-lit sky, stay close. The fire's not done speaking yet." The storm broke before dawn. Rain faded to mist, leaving the world washed and hollow. The first pale light slid through the cracked shutters, touching Hayes's face where he slept against the wall. Nora hadn't closed her eyes. She'd sat through the hours, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, the soft hiss of the stove, the way the wind whispered secrets through the gaps in the roof. When he stirred, she spoke. "You talk in your sleep." He blinked, the grey of morning softening his roughness. "Didn't mean to." "You said a name." He sat up slow. "Whose?" "Calder." His eyes darkened. "That's the man I kept alive. The one they wanted dead." He nodded. "The sheriff said he robbed a payroll, killed 2 deputies, but when I found him, he was bleeding out in the desert, hands empty. I couldn't leave him. Turned out mercy doesn't weigh much against law." "Is he still alive?" "Somewhere south, I hope." She studied him. "You risked your life for a stranger." He gave a small shrug. "I've been a stranger most my life. I owed him that much." The simplicity of it made something ache in her. Men in this town talked about honor like it was a coin. Hayes carried it like a scar. She rose, fetched the kettle, poured the last of the water. "Drink." He took the cup, his fingers brushing hers. His hand was warm, despite the blood loss. "You don't scare easy." "I learned not to," she said. "Fear draws wolves." He smiled faintly. "And yet you let one in." She tilted her head. "You think that's what you are?" He looked away. "I know it." Outside, the light grew gold. Smoke from the stove drifted toward the window, curling like breath. Nora stepped closer, watching the street beyond the glass. The men were gone. The town still slept, unaware that violence had crossed its threshold and left quietly before sunrise. "You could ride now," she said. "The ridge will cover your trail." He didn't answer. Instead, he set the cup down and stood, walking to the window beside her. His reflection merged with hers in the glass, 2 shapes bound by shadow and flame. "You'd let me leave?" he asked. Her throat tightened. "Letting you isn't the same as wanting you gone." He studied her, quiet for a long moment. Then, "If I stay, they'll come back. I know. And if I leave, they'll follow. Then we both lose," she whispered. He exhaled slow. "Maybe there's a third way." She turned. "What way is that?" He picked up the leather pouch from the table, untied the twine, and opened it. Inside lay a small brass locket, dull with age. He flipped it open. A woman's face smiled from within, gentle, kind, alive with something the desert couldn't kill. "She's the sheriff's wife," Nora said softly. Hayes nodded. Was. She died a year ago. Then why? Because Calder was her brother, he said. He found proof she'd been killed for knowing what she shouldn't. The sheriff buried it. I buried the rest. Nora's hand flew to her mouth. You're saying... The sheriff framed Calder, hunted him down, made sure the story fit. This, he held up the locket, was hers. It carries a confession hidden behind the picture. I saw it with my own eyes. Then why not show it? Because men like him don't lose in daylight. The truth sat heavy between them. Nora's heart beat faster. The sheriff, the man who had sworn she was safe here, had built his safety on lies. Hayes set the locket down gently. That's why they followed me. That's why they'll keep following, until this truth burns quiet. She reached for his arm. Then we take it where daylight can't twist it. To someone else. Another town, another law. His gaze found hers. You'd leave all this. I never belonged to it. He looked at her hand on his sleeve, her pulse beneath her skin. You'd ride with a wanted man? I'd ride with the truth, she said. For the first time, the hardness in his eyes softened fully. Something unspoken passed between them. A shared wound, a shared defiance. He stepped closer. If you come, there's no coming back. I stopped belonging to yesterday a long time ago. He reached up, touched a stray strand of hair at her cheek, slow and careful, as if he didn't quite believe he was allowed. You make danger sound like mercy, he murmured. And you make mercy sound like sin, she said, smiling faintly. For a moment the world held still. No rain, no law, no past. Just the quiet hum of two hearts finally speaking the same language. Then his voice dropped lower. We leave tonight, when the moon's high. I'll pack food, water, a map. He stopped her with a look. Bring only what you can't live without. She nodded. Then it won't be much. He gave a slow nod back, and something gentle passed through his roughness, like wind smoothing stone. They spent the day in quiet preparation, patching his wound, mending the saddle straps, gathering what could fit inside one small satchel. When night fell, the desert turned silver again. Nora stood at the edge of town, shawl pulled close, watching Hayes lead the horse from the stables. He moved like a man who'd already chosen his road. She turned once to look at the telegraph office, its windows dark. The life she'd built there was small and safe, but safety had never made her heart beat this way. He offered his hand. You ready? She took it. I already was. He helped her up behind him. The horse shifted, muscles alive beneath them. The stars spilled wide across the sky. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but sure. Whatever waits beyond that ridge, we ride toward it, not away. The night wind lifted her hair. She leaned closer, felt his heartbeat steady against her back. Then let it find us, she said. They rode into the dark, two shadows beneath the western sky, danger and desire woven into the same breath. If you've felt the pull of freedom in their ride, stay close. The trail ahead still hides its reckoning. The desert stretched wide beneath the moon, pale ridges and black shadows, a world carved from silence. The air was cool now, sweet with sage and the memory of rain. Each hoofbeat was a whisper across the sand, steady and slow. Nora held on to Hayes as they rode through the night. She could feel his strength in the rhythm of his body, the quiet patience of a man who knew how to listen to the land. Beneath her palms, the steady rise and fall of his breath felt like safety disguised as danger. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The stars did all the talking, scattered, ancient, watching. When they finally stopped at the base of a low bluff, dawn was beginning to grey the edges of the world. Hayes dismounted first, then turned and offered his hand to her. She took it without hesitation. "Not much cover," she said softly, glancing around. "Enough till sunrise," he answered. "There's a dry creek bed just beyond that ridge. We'll rest there." She followed him through the brush. The ground was soft, the smell of wet dust rising underfoot. They found the creek, a shallow scar in the earth, half hidden by rock and juniper. He led the horse down, then began building a small fire with dry twigs and a piece of flint. Nora crouched beside him. "They'll follow the road," he nodded. "That's why we won't take it." "And after they stop looking?" "Then we'll find where truth still means something." She smiled faintly. "Does such a place exist?" He paused, met her gaze. "I'd like to think so." The fire caught, glowing low between them, its light painted gold on his cheekbones, on the edges of his hands. Nora watched the way the flames reflected in his eyes, grey, then amber, then something she couldn't name. "You should sleep," he said. "You haven't closed your eyes since last night." "Neither have you." He half smiled. "I've gone longer." "You'll fall from the saddle before sunset." "I'll fall softer if you're there to catch me." She laughed quietly. "That's not how falling works." "It is tonight." She shook her head, but her heart warmed at the sound of his voice, that rough, slow drawl that made even danger sound like a promise. When the fire settled to embers, Nora wrapped her shawl tighter and leaned back against a smooth stone. Hayes sat across from her, his silhouette sharp against the pale light. For a while, neither spoke. Then she said, "Tell me what you left behind." He looked toward the horizon. "A house near the border. 2 rooms and a porch. I built it with my brother. He's gone now, killed in a dust storm looking for me." "I'm sorry." He nodded once. "So am I." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever think about going back?" "No," he said. "Some places don't forgive the feet that leave them." Nora's gaze drifted to the fire. "My father used to say the same thing." "Is he still alive?" "I don't know. He left when I was 12. Took the horses, the money, and every quiet thing my mother ever had. I stopped waiting after the first winter." Hayes's eyes softened. "That's a long time to be alone." "Alone's not the same as lonely," she said. "At least, that's what I told myself." He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "You ever stop believing it?" She looked at him. The dawn was lifting now, silver spreading over his shoulders. "The night you walked into town," she said. "I did." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he rose, walked to his saddlebag, and pulled out a small tin. Inside were dried beans and a strip of jerky. He handed her half. "Eat," he said. "It's not much, but it keeps a person human." She smiled. "I'll remember that." They ate in quiet, the sound of crackling fire and soft chewing filling the still air. Above them, the sky began to blush with morning. After a while, Hayes stood, looking down the valley. "We'll ride east before the sun climbs too high. The canyon's deeper there. Safer. Safer doesn't always mean better, she said. He looked over his shoulder. You sound like someone who's learned that the hard way. Maybe I have. She rose, brushed dust from her skirt. The hem was torn where she'd ripped it to bind his wound. She knelt beside him and lifted his sleeve. Let me see. He didn't resist. The bandage was dark with dried blood, but the bleeding had stopped. She cleaned it gently with a damp cloth. His voice was quiet when he spoke. You ever think about what happens after all this? She smiled faintly. After? After we outrun them. After the truth gets told. I haven't let myself, she admitted. I just keep riding until the world feels right again. He watched her fingers work. And if it never does? Then I'll build something that does. Her touch lingered at his skin. He caught her wrist, not to stop her, just to hold it there, his thumb tracing the pulse beneath. You're a dangerous kind of hope, Nora Vale. Why? She whispered. Because I almost believe you. The air between them shifted. The first sunlight broke across the bluff, turning her hair to fire. He reached up, brushed the edge of it from her cheek. She didn't move away. For a moment, the world stopped breathing. Then a hawk cried somewhere above, sharp and wild, and the spell broke. Hayes stepped back, cleared his throat, busied himself with the saddle straps. Nora let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She packed their small fire out, covered the ashes with sand. When they mounted again, the light was full and gold. The desert gleamed, alive, endless, waiting. They rode side by side for a while, silent but not apart. The trail ahead wound between mesas and dry grass, the wind rising to greet them like an old friend. Hayes finally said, Once we reach Copper Valley, there's someone I trust. A man named Leland. He was a marshal before the war turned him bitter. He'll know what to do with that locket. And then? She asked. Then we find a way to live with what it costs. She looked at him, the set of his jaw, the lines at his eyes. You don't think we can win, do you? He didn't answer. The silence said enough, but the wind shifted and the scent of rain returned, faint like a promise, and Nora, staring at the horizon, whispered, Maybe it's not about winning. Maybe it's about surviving long enough to see what love looks like after the dust settles. Hayes's hand brushed hers on the reins. Not a grab, not a claim, just a touch that said, I hear you. And in the open breath between one heartbeat and the next, danger felt almost like peace. If your heart still rides beside theirs beneath this endless sky, stay close. The next sunrise may ask them to pay for every mile they've stolen. By midday, the sun burned hard enough to turn the sand white. The wind carried no sound except the horses' breathing and the faint rustle of grass scraping against dry stone. They had ridden for hours without a word. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of the things they hadn't dared to name. Hayes rode slightly ahead, hat pulled low, the bandage on his shoulder darkening with sweat. Nora watched him move, steady, deliberate, a man who read the world by its shadows. You're slowing, she said. I've been worse, he answered, not turning. Worse isn't the same as fine. He smiled faintly. You argue like someone who likes to win. Only when I'm right. He glanced over, eyes glinting. then you win too often." The brief exchange broke the stillness like a breath after drowning. Nora smiled, even as the heat pressed against her. They crested a small rise and saw Copper Valley in the distance, a thin ribbon of green and a cluster of roofs half buried by dust. "That's it?" she asked. "That's what's left," he said. And they rode down toward the basin, where the air cooled slightly. A few cottonwoods leaned over a narrow stream, and a weathered cabin sat at the far end of the clearing. Smoke curled faintly from its chimney. Hayes dismounted, winced at the pull of his wound. Nora slid down beside him and caught his arm. "You should have told me it opened again." "It's nothing." "Blood's never nothing," she said sharply. He almost laughed. "You'd make a fine doctor if you didn't care so much." "I care because you don't." That quieted him. Before she could say more, the cabin door creaked open. A tall man stepped out, grey hair, lean frame, a revolver slung low but loose. His eyes, sharp and steady, took them both in. "Hayes Rourke," he said. "I'll be damned." "Not yet," Hayes replied. The man's gaze flicked to Nora, then back. "Who's the lady?" "Someone who's seen too much to go back," Hayes said. Leland nodded once. "That makes two of you." They followed him inside. The cabin was small but tidy. A table, a cot, a shelf of old ledgers. The air smelled of coffee and dusted wood. "Sit," Leland said. "You look like hell." Hayes eased into a chair. Nora stood by the window, watching the horizon out of habit. "You bring what I think you did?" Leland asked. Hayes reached into his coat and placed the locket on the table. The older man stared at it for a long time, then let out a slow whistle. "Still chasing ghosts, huh?" "Not ghosts," Hayes said. "Justice." Leland gave a short laugh. "Out here those words don't mean the same thing." "They should." Leland opened the locket, scanned the small folded paper hidden behind the portrait. His face tightened. "Well, I'll be damned again." "It's enough to bury the sheriff," Hayes said. "Maybe," Leland murmured. "Or enough to bury you first." Nora turned from the window. "So what do we do?" Leland met her eyes, something like respect flickering there. "You burn it, or you run with it." "There's no middle road." Hayes leaned back. "We ride east tonight. There's a man in Tucson who still believes in law." Leland shook his head. "He believes in what he can afford, same as the rest of us." Nora crossed her arms. "Then we'll find someone who can't be bought." "That kind of man's usually dead," Leland said gently. Hayes's voice dropped low. "So are the ones who keep secrets." The three stood in silence for a moment. Then Nora spoke, steady but quiet. "You both talk like the world's already ended. Maybe it has, but I still believe in mourning." Leland studied her, then nodded slowly. "She's got more fight than you, Rourke." Hayes's mouth curved. "That's why I'm still breathing." Leland poured 3 cups of coffee. "Then you better drink. You'll need it." They sat together as the day faded. Outside, the sun lowered itself into the horizon, painting the desert in blood and gold. When the last light dimmed, Hayes rose. "We ride when the moon climbs." Leland stood too. "I'll draw them west. Buy you a few hours." "Too risky." "Son, everything's risky now. You taught me that." They clasped hands, a silent promise between men who'd seen too many graves. Then Leland turned to Nora. "Keep him alive. He won't admit it, but he's half in the ground already." "I will," she said. After he left, the cabin grew still. Hayes stood near the window, watching the growing dark. Nora moved closer, her voice low. "You trust him? With what's left of me?" She hesitated, then reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. "Then I'll trust him too." He looked down at her hand, at the way her courage trembled, but didn't break. "You don't know how to stay out of danger, do you?" "Maybe I just stopped mistaking safety for peace," she said. The room went quiet. The air between them carried the slow burn of something neither could run from any more. He turned fully toward her. "When this ends, and it will, what then?" She met his gaze. "Then I stop running. And if I'm gone, then I keep riding." Something in his chest broke and healed at once. He reached up, fingertips brushing the edge of her jaw. "You talk like a prayer and a warning all at once." "Then listen close," she whispered. His hand slid to the back of her neck, gentle but sure. The world outside disappeared. Only the quiet pulse of their hearts, the warmth of breath meeting breath. When he kissed her, it wasn't wild. It was slow, certain, like a man remembering what life felt like before loss. The firelight painted them gold. Her hands found his shirt, his heart beat beneath. He pulled back only long enough to breathe her name. "Nora." "Don't apologize," she whispered, "not for wanting something honest." He closed his eyes, forehead resting against hers. "This won't end the way stories should. Then let it end the way truth does." Outside, the first wind of the night carried dust and thunder. Inside, they stayed close. Danger and tenderness, tangled and inseparable. If your heart still feels the heat between firelight and silence, stay close. The storm they've outrun is only half over. The wind rose again before midnight. It came down the canyon like a warning, dry, sharp, and alive with sand. The small fire in the hearth flickered low, painting their faces in uneven gold. Nora woke first. Hayes still sat near the door, hat brim low, revolver within reach. He hadn't slept at all. The firelight caught the tired edges of him, the scar along his temple, the faint tremor in his hand, the weight of too many miles. "You should rest," she whispered. "I don't trust the dark," he said. "Then trust me." He looked at her, and something softened. The kind of look a man gives when he's out of strength, but still trying to believe. "You ever think," he murmured, "that maybe we were meant to find peace in the wrong place?" She rose from the cot, crossed the room, and knelt beside him. "Peace isn't a place," she said quietly. "It's a person who makes the silence stop hurting." His breath caught. "Then maybe I found mine too late." "Or just in time," she said. Outside, thunder rolled far off, low, steady, waiting. Hayes stood, checked the rifle by the window. "They'll move again before dawn. We need to go soon." Nora reached for his arm. "You're still bleeding. You won't make the ridge." "I'll make it." She didn't argue. She knew men like him. Once they chose their road, even death had to catch up. But when he turned away, she said softly, "You don't have to do this alone anymore." He stopped, the muscles in his shoulders tightening. I've spent half my life making sure no one else paid for my choices. Then maybe it's time you let someone choose with you." He faced her then. The moonlight through the window carved silver into his eyes. "You don't know what you're asking." "Yes, I do," she whispered. "To stop running, just for one night." He hesitated. The wind pressed against the walls. The fire snapped, low and soft. He stepped closer. Her voice trembled but didn't break. "If we die tomorrow, let tonight mean something." He reached for her face, slow, almost reverent. "You sure?" She nodded once. "I've never been more sure." He kissed her then. Not fast, not desperate. Slow like sunrise, careful like prayer. Her fingers gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, feeling the heat of him, the trembling under the strength. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and the weight of the world seemed to slide off his back for one brief, stolen breath. The firelight caught the edges of their hands, their faces, their breath turning into gold and shadow. Outside, rain began to fall, not heavy, but steady, soft as forgiveness. He pulled back only to whisper against her skin, "You're making it hard to remember what's right." "Then forget for a while," she breathed. The storm built outside, rattling the roof. Inside, it was another kind of storm, the kind that burned without breaking. They moved together in rhythm with the wind, the fire, the pulse of something older than fear. When the rain eased, they lay still, the quiet between them alive with everything they didn't need to say. Hayes traced the curve of her shoulder with a fingertip, his voice low and rough. "You make a man believe in second chances." She smiled against his chest. "You make a woman forget she ever needed one." He chuckled softly. "That might be the most dangerous thing you've said." "Then maybe we're both outlaws now." He kissed her hair. "You're no outlaw. I am tonight." They stayed like that until the first hint of dawn bled into the sky. The world outside had that strange stillness that comes before truth wakes up. Hayes rose, pulling his shirt back on, fastening the holster with quiet precision. Nora sat up, watching him. "You're leaving before the sun rises?" He didn't answer right away. "Leland's not back. That means something went wrong." "Then we go together." He turned, met her eyes. "No, you stay. If I don't come back, ride south. Don't stop till you see the river. Follow it east. There's a town called Mercy Creek." Her jaw set. "You think I'll just wait here while you walk into a trap?" "I don't think. I hope. Hope's not enough. It's all I've got left." She rose, crossed to him, pressed her palm flat against his chest. "Then take mine too." He looked down at her hand, then lifted it to his lips. "If I had met you before all this..." She cut him off gently. "Then you wouldn't have been you." A distant gunshot cracked the morning. Hayes's head snapped toward the sound. "Leland," he said. He grabbed his hat, slung the rifle, and moved for the door. Nora followed, heart hammering. He turned in the doorway, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "If I don't come back, promise me you'll ride." She swallowed hard. "Only if you promise to give me reason not to." He gave her one look, something deep, final, alive, then was gone. The rain swallowed him. The door swung shut. Nora stood in the empty cabin, the smell of gunpowder and firelight still on her skin. She pressed her hand to her lips where his kiss still burned. Outside, thunder grumbled low across the valley, and somewhere beyond the ridge the echo of gunfire rolled again. She grabbed her coat, the pouch with the locket, and whispered to the empty room, "You're not dying alone, Hayes Rourke." Then she ran into the rain. If your heart still beats with theirs beneath this storm-lit sky, stay close. The dawn hasn't chosen who survives it yet. The rain came harder as Nora ran, the kind that blurred distance, that erased tracks and names alike. Mud clung to her boots, breath tore through her chest, but she didn't stop. Hayes was somewhere beyond the ridge, where thunder and gunfire tangled like two beasts fighting in the dark. The valley below shimmered with lightning. She slid down the wet slope, gripping roots and stones until her palms stung. The smell of gunpowder hit her first, sharp and bitter. Then came the silence, that awful, heavy kind that follows after bullets have done their talking. She crouched low behind a fallen log. Shapes moved in the mist. Two men, rifles in hand, dragging someone between them. Her heart froze. The figure they hauled was limp, dark coat soaked through with rain and blood. "Hayes," she whispered. The men spoke low, voices roughened by drink and hate. "Sheriff said alive if we can manage," one muttered. "Dead's fine too, long as the proof burns." The other spat. "Proof's just a trinket now." The locket. Nora's pulse kicked. She scanned the ground, spotted a fallen revolver half buried in mud. She grabbed it, the cold steel biting into her palm. She'd fired only once in her life, at a snake near the stables. But fear had a way of teaching fast. She waited until the first man lifted Hayes's head, until she saw the faint twitch of life in him. His face pale, jaw clenched, eyes barely open. Then she stood. "Let him go!" The shout tore through the rain. Both men spun, rifles rising. She fired once. The sound split the air, echoing through the canyon walls. One man dropped his gun, clutching his shoulder, a curse lost in thunder. The other turned toward her, too quick, too sure. The world slowed. She saw the flash of his barrel, the spark of metal. And then Hayes moved. He surged up from the mud, like the desert itself had given him back. His hand found the second man's collar, yanked him forward, slammed him into the wet ground. The gun went off, wild, harmless. Nora ran, mud splashing at her skirt. She reached Hayes as he shoved the man aside and took a shaky step backward. He was breathing hard, eyes half wild. "I told you to stay." "And you told me to trust you," she said, voice shaking. "That works both ways." He almost smiled, blood on his lip. "You're impossible. You're bleeding. Not the first time." He staggered, and she caught him, her shoulder under his arm. "We have to move," he muttered. "More'll come." "Then we move," she said. They stumbled together toward the bluff, the rain washing blood into the dirt. Behind them, the wounded man groaned, calling out for help that wouldn't come. By the time they reached the ridge, dawn had burned a hole through the storm. The light came raw and red, like a wound opening in the sky. Hayes sank to one knee, pressing a hand to his side. "Let me see," she said. "It's fine." "Hayes," he cut her off with a look. "You saved my life, Nora Vale. Don't ruin the poetry by patching me up too quick." She laughed, a small, broken sound, then knelt beside him anyway. His coat was torn near the ribs. She pressed her hands there, felt warmth spreading between her fingers. "You'll live," she said. He winced, but smiled faintly. "You sound like you've decided that for me." "Someone has to." The wind shifted. Below them, smoke curled from the cabin. Faint, rising, wrong. Nora's stomach dropped. Leland. Hayes followed her gaze. They burned it. They watched in silence as the smoke grew thicker. All that remained of refuge and firelight vanished into the morning air. Hayes spoke quietly. "He bought us time." Her voice broke. "He died for it." He turned to her, eyes dark but steady. "Then we make it worth it." She reached into her coat, pulled out the small leather pouch, and opened it. The locket lay safe inside. She held it out. "This is what they want." What he died for. Hayes looked at it, at the simple brass circle that had carried so much death. "Then it's time we give it to someone who can't be bought. And if no one fits that?" He glanced at her. "Then we make sure the truth outlives us anyway." The words hung there, raw and final. He swayed, and she caught him again, her arms wrapping around him. His head rested against her shoulder for a moment too long. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For what?" "For bringing the storm to your door." She closed her eyes. "Maybe I needed the rain." He smiled faintly. "You sound like hope again." "I never stopped." For a while they just sat there. Rain easing, wind softening, the whole desert holding its breath. She felt the slow, stubborn rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her palm. He lifted his hand, brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. "You saved me twice," he said. "And you keep almost dying," she replied. "Seems fair." He laughed once, quiet and rough. "When this ends, if it ever does, I'll find a way to give you something that lasts." She met his eyes. "You already have." Below them, the smoke thinned. The valley was quiet again, but the peace felt fragile, like glass between storms. Hayes looked toward the east. "We'll ride when the sun's higher. We can reach the border by nightfall." Nora nodded, though her chest felt tight. "And after that?" He hesitated, eyes on the horizon. "After that, maybe we stop running." The light touched their faces, soft and warm. She leaned closer, resting her forehead against his. "Then let's make it to that after," she whispered. The wind carried their silence across the ridge, blending with the sound of a world still healing from thunder. If your heart still believes in dawn after the storm, stay close. The trail ahead carries the final reckoning of love, loss, and the truth they bled for. The road to the border ran like a scar across the land, narrow, empty, endless. The morning sun burned the mist away, and with it the soft mercy of night. Heat shimmered on the sand. The smell of smoke from Leland's cabin still lingered in the wind. Hayes rode ahead, silent, shoulders tight beneath his torn coat. Nora followed close, her gaze fixed on the horizon, a thin blue line that promised escape but whispered of danger. Neither spoke for miles. When they finally stopped beside a dying mesquite tree, the world was quiet again. Hayes swung down from his horse and braced a hand against the trunk. Blood had seeped through his bandage again. Nora dismounted before he could protest. "Sit down," he shook his head. "We're close." Close doesn't matter if you fall before you get there." Her voice was firm, the same tone that had stopped him more than bullets ever could. He sat. The air shimmered around them, thick with dust and heat. She knelt beside him, unwrapping the blood-soaked cloth. "You should have let me finish what I started back at the cabin," she said. "You were busy saving my life," he said with a faint smile. "And now I'm busy keeping it." He looked at her, the sunlight turning her hair to gold and flame. "You always talk like the world still deserves you." "It doesn't," she said softly. "But you do." The words landed deeper than she meant them to. His breath hitched. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Hayes reached up and caught her wrist, his thumb tracing the pulse beneath her skin. "If I live through this, it'll be because of you. If you die, it'll be because you didn't listen." He laughed under his breath. "You're something fierce, Nora Vale. And you're something foolish, Hayes Rourke." The banter faded into quiet. The wind hummed low across the sand. She tied the bandage tight and sat back on her heels, exhaustion washing through her. He broke the silence first. "There's something you need to know before we reach Tucson." "What?" He reached into his coat and drew out the locket. The brass gleamed dull in the sunlight. "This doesn't just name the sheriff, it names others, men with money, power. It's not just one lie we're carrying, it's a chain of them." She swallowed hard. "Then it's worth dying for." He nodded slowly. "That's what scares me." "Not death," she said. "The truth." He looked at her then, a long, quiet look that stripped away everything else. "You're the only truth I've got left." The wind lifted her shawl. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was soft. "Then don't waste it on dying." They rested till the sun dipped low again, then rode on. By dusk, the land began to change, the flat stretches giving way to broken hills and scattered cacti. Somewhere beyond that horizon lay the border, and a town where law still pretended to mean something. But danger never forgets. As they crossed a dry wash, the horses startled, ears flicking, heads high. Hayes reined in his mount, eyes narrowing. "Riders," he said. Nora's heart jumped. "How many?" "Too many." From the ridge above, 6 men appeared, shadows against the dying sun. At their center rode the sheriff himself, his badge glinting like false gold. "Rourke!" the sheriff called, his voice carrying through the dust. "You've been hard to find." Hayes turned his horse slowly to face him. "Didn't know you were still looking." The sheriff smiled thin. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you." Hayes's jaw tightened. "You mean truth?" "Truth," the sheriff said, "is whatever survives." The words were colder than the wind. Nora's hand slipped to the pistol at her hip. Hayes noticed and shook his head once, barely a movement. "Not yet." The sheriff's men began to spread out, forming a half-circle around them. Dust rose beneath their horses' hooves, blurring the world into gold and smoke. "You can't ride your way out of this one," the sheriff said. "You hand it over, maybe I let you keep breathing long enough to regret it." Hayes's voice was steady. "You already took enough from me, Sheriff. You won't take this too." The sheriff's eyes flicked to Nora. You picked strange company, miss. He's a killer, a liar, a man who'd sell his soul to feel clean again. Nora met his gaze, chin lifted. And you're a man who burned the truth to keep your hands warm. The sheriff's smile faltered. Careful what stories you tie yourself to. Hayes shifted in the saddle. Funny, you used to like stories, especially the ones you wrote yourself. The sheriff's hand twitched toward his gun. You want a last word, Rourke? Hayes's voice dropped low. No, just a last act. He moved first. The world exploded into sound. Gunfire, thunder, dust. Horses screamed. Nora's shot cracked the air, hitting the ground near a rider's boots, scattering him sideways. Hayes fired once, twice, precise, measured, deadly. The sheriff's men fell back, returning fire. The ridge lit with muzzle flashes, bright as lightning. Nora ducked behind her horse, heart hammering. She saw Hayes drop to one knee, reload, then look at her through the haze. "Ride!" he shouted. "I'm not leaving you! Now!" A bullet ripped through the air beside her. The horse reared, screaming. Hayes pushed forward, covering her with fire, but there were too many, 6 against 2, and no room left for miracles. Then, above the chaos, the sheriff's voice rang out. "You can't save her, Rourke. You couldn't save any of them." Something in Hayes broke. He turned, aimed, and fired. The sheriff's hat flew off, spinning into the dust. Another shot answered, and Hayes stumbled, blood blooming across his chest. "Hayes!" Nora screamed. He fell to one knee, still clutching the locket in his hand. The sheriff raised his gun again, but the storm had other plans. Lightning split the sky, white and merciless. Thunder crashed so close it shook the earth. The horses panicked, scattering. Dust swallowed everything. When the smoke cleared, the sheriff was gone, his men fleeing into the hills. Nora ran to Hayes, dropped to her knees beside him. "No, no, no!" He looked up at her, pain carved deep into his face, rain beginning again, soft, cold, cleansing. "You're all right?" he asked, voice breaking. "Don't talk," she said. "You're going to be fine." He smiled faintly. "That's a lie I'll take." She pressed her hands against his wound, tears mixing with rain. "Don't you dare leave me now." He reached for her hand, covered it with his own. "The locket. It has to reach daylight. Promise me. You'll take it yourself." He shook his head slowly. "If I fall, you ride. Don't look back." "Hayes." "Promise me, Nora." Her throat closed. "I promise." He exhaled, the breath shuddering. His hand fell, the locket still clutched between their palms. The rain grew heavier, washing blood into the earth, turning it dark as memory. She bowed her head over him, whispering through the storm, "You don't get to leave me like this." But the sky stayed silent. If your heart still beats in the quiet between thunder and loss, stay close. The western sky has one last truth to tell, of love that refuses to die, and a promise that will cross the border with the dawn. The storm passed before dawn. The desert stood still again, washed clean but not healed. Clouds drifted low over the ridges, pale as ghosts. In the valley below, the rainwater shimmered in every hollow, turning the dust to mirrors. Nora knelt beside Hayes where he had fallen. His breath was shallow, each one a fragile battle. His blood had soaked into the sand, but the warmth of his skin still clung to her palms. She pressed them harder, as if she could hold his spirit in place through sheer will. "You promised me we'd stop running," she whispered. He tried to smile. "Guess I ran out of road first." "Don't say that." His eyes opened, grey and soft, like the morning sky before it remembers how to shine. "You remember the first night," he murmured. "The rain, the coffee, the way you looked at me like I was more than what I'd done." "I still do," she said. He breathed slow. "Then that's enough." The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they'd fought for, every word unsaid, every glance that had built a world they never had time to live in. "You can't die here," she whispered. "Not after everything." He reached for her hand, fingers trembling but sure. "Don't let the truth die with me, Nora Vale. Promise me." She pressed his hand to her heart. "It won't. I swear it." He looked at her like a man seeing the end of a long storm, weary, grateful, at peace. "You were the only thing I didn't regret." Tears broke free down her cheeks. "Then stay for me." "I can't," he said softly, "but I'll ride with you anyway. Every mile, every dawn." And then he went still. The morning light touched his face, turned the lines of him gold. The wind rose, lifting a strand of her hair, carrying it east, toward the border, toward the place where he had wanted her to live. She sat beside him until the sun burned through the last of the clouds. The desert woke around her, birds calling, wind sighing through dry grass. Life, stubborn and beautiful, refusing to end. When she finally stood, she took his hat and set it on her head. Then she pried open his hand and took the locket, its brass dull but warm, as if it still remembered his heartbeat. She saddled the horse in silence. Before she mounted, she looked once more at the man who had walked through her storm and made it mean something. "You were right," she said softly. "Some truths have to survive the ones who find them." She rode east. The world unfurled before her. Red rock and gold dust, wide and endless. Every step of the horse felt like memory turned into motion. By nightfall, the border lights shimmered in the distance, faint, trembling, like the last breath of a candle. Nora stopped on a rise, pulled the locket from her coat, and opened it. Inside, the paper was still there, the handwriting faded but legible, the confession of the sheriff's wife, the truth that had cost so many lives. She read it once, her voice steady. Then she closed it again and held it to her chest. "This isn't the end," she whispered. "It's just the part where you start to forgive yourself." She tucked it back into her coat and rode the last mile into the dark. By the time the moon rose high, she reached Tucson, a tired town half asleep, its lanterns flickering in the wind. She found the marshal's office, tied the horse outside, and left the locket on the desk with a single note. "For the record that never lies." Then she turned and walked back into the night. The streets were empty, but she could still hear him. In the rhythm of the wind, in the hush of her own breath, in the sound of her name carried far beyond where he'd fallen. She rode south again, chasing the place where dawn met dusk, the place he'd promised they'd stop running. And when the first light rose, painting the desert gold, she whispered to the sky, "Ride with me, Hayes. just one more mile. The wind answered. Somewhere in that sound was peace. Somewhere in it was love that didn't end. If this story has touched a quiet place in your heart, let your light ride with it. Share its warmth, whisper its truth, and keep this western fire burning beneath your own sky.